Hey, it's Scott Kaselniak. I'm here with another lesson, and today we're going to talk about integrated pest management. I know we're not quite into the fun stuff yet of pest control, but this is the foundation. This is how we make our pest control decisions. And so we need to really learn this. And this is just a basics. There's much more to go into than what this presentation has. But for the basic understanding of how we make decisions, hopefully this lesson will be of value of you. So let's talk about IPM and specifically what it is. And integrated pest management is a science-based decision-making process utilizing multiple control techniques, not just one, multiple. That's what makes it integrated. And this keeps pests at an acceptable level. So it doesn't say elimination. It doesn't say it keeps pests, you know, zero or whatever it is, and it's an acceptable level. So what that means is there's going to be thresholds of what's acceptable with different pests in different places. So we need to actually be aware of that. So that's what IPM is at its core. It's how we're going to make our treatment decisions. The core philosophy of IPM is that it prioritizes prevention of pest problems before they occur. It makes informed decisions based off pest biology and monitoring. It combines multiple compatible tools and tactics. It minimizes risks to people, property, and the environment. IPM isn't about avoiding pesticides. It's about using them only when data suggests that they're necessary. It's a tool. We're not just going to go and do template treatments or anything like that. We're actually going to know why we're doing what we're doing. So why does it matter in pest control? Well, IPM helps pest control professionals reduce treating reactively. So we're going to be proactive, right? You're going to use safer, more targeted methods, improve long term results and prevention, reduce risk to people, pets, and property, and maintain credible framework to solve pest issues. I think that's the one we're all most interested in is how do we solve pest problems? Well, IPM is the way we solve pest problems. All these other things are great as well because of course, we want to reduce risk. Of course, we want long-term results and using safer methods, and we don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive. So IPM hits the mark on all of this. There's certain steps, and depending on the book that you read, you're going to see different variation of the steps of IPM. But most steps are going to be along the lines of this. You may see a variation or two, but for IPM, we always start with inspection and identification. We need to know what the pest is and where it's active. That's extremely important. It has to be specific. We're not just going to say that, it's just a cockroach in general, right? We need to know if it's a German cockroach. We need to know if it's an Oriental cockroach. We need to know the specific species. We need to understand the biology and the environmental factors of why that pest is there, because that's going to be important for our recommendations. Monitoring and thresholds, that's another step. So we need to track the pest numbers and the behavior. There are different ways to do this. And we only act when populations exceed actionable levels. So that's going to vary. And when we get into that, we'll talk about like, well, what's actionable in a commercial kitchen versus a home, right? Then there's going to be the control tactics and integration. So we're going to use physical, cultural, biological tactics first, and then add the chemical tools only when justified, right? So some things you can do without product for sure. Other things you're going to need products, but you want to use it in conjunction with these things. For the most part, when people are calling us up at a pest control company, the use of product is going to be um, it's going to require the use of some kind of product. We just have to figure out what and where and how to use minimal products when we can. And of course, there's the evaluation and the adjustments. Check what has worked and refine those strategies for the next time. So we want to know, is what we're doing actually working or not? That's very important. So IPM tools and tactics. So professionals are going to draw from this toolbox, and that's going to be cultural methods, things like sanitation and habitat modification. So sometimes you have to tell someone, clean your house, right? If the German cockroaches are eating all the food that is spilled everywhere, or the mice are doing that, it does us no good to put bait out, right? Because then why do they care about the bait when they have all this food? Sometimes we need to modify the habitat, right? Is maybe we go in there and we have a problem with camel crickets, and we say, well, they like a lot of moisture. What if we put a dehumidifier in the crawl space, right? There's physical and mechanical controls where we could use traps or barriers. This is like either uh, the exclusion efforts for like mice, rats, and other insects, or trapping, snap traps, um, scissor traps, and things like that. Those are the most common you'll see, and they don't require any chemical product. They're just an actual trap. Biological controls. Well, you can use predators, biological agents for this. And then, of course, there's chemical controls, which are the precision pesticide used when the thresholds are exceeded. This isn't like no chemicals. We don't want to use any, right? It's just data driven selection of the best tool for the situation. So think of it that way. It's going to make what we do that much more effective if we're integrating these other tactics into it. So let's start with inspection and ID. So this is a brief overview of inspection and ID, but we're going to go into this more in depth as because they deserve their own little lesson, right? So first thing we must do is identify the exact species that we are treating for, and you're going to have to learn insect and pest ID. So NPMA makes a great app or the field guide to help with this, but you're going to have to get your hands on some glue traps and things like that and really see these things and their evidence because the pests and their evidence in, not an HD picture, it looks a little bit different. So hopefully the company that you work for is showing you this stuff that are on glue traps. We must do a thorough inspection of the property. Absolutely. So we need to inspect the entry points. How are they getting in? Harborage areas. Can they live on the property? Are there conducive conditions? A conducive condition is where food, water, and harborage meet. So that's basically like termites would be wood to ground contact where food, water, and harborage will be. And of course, evidence. What evidence do we have? Do we have live or dead pests? Do we have gnaw marks? Do we have frass or droppings? So these are all the things we're going to look for in the inspection. And you can use, yes, you're going to talk with the customer and use their information from their interview as a guide, but it needs to be a loose guide because a lot of times customers don't know identification or they'll go to Google and Google will tell them it's something completely different. Or even now they'll go to AI, and I've used like Chat GPT and things like that. And I've asked them, what is this that I'm looking at? And they don't come close to the pest ID just yet. Maybe in the future, but for right now, pest identification still needs to be done by pest management professionals. So we're going to have to learn that. So to learn that, you need to increase your knowledge base. This is really the underlying thing of IPM. Like we get IPM, we have the steps, but you have to build your knowledge base up. There's no workaround to this. You need to know your stuff. This is your craft, your profession. So the knowledge of it must be learned. So we must learn their biology and habits, the pests we deal with, so that we can make those proper decisions. This will also help narrow down the inspection. It really does. So if we know that this is the issue, like if I know Oriental cockroaches are the issue, where am I going to spend more of my time? Yes, you're still going to look everywhere, but you're going to start saying, okay, I'm going to budget my time to this crawl space, right? It's cool, it's damp, it has some moisture. That seems like the place rather than the hot, dry attic, right? So we're going to narrow down our inspections by doing this. This also allows for accurate recommendations. So if we're trying to recommend something, whether it be exclusion or some kind of sanitation, we can draw on our knowledge base to explain it to a customer. So the example I gave earlier about German cockroaches and there's food out, right? Well, if we know something about German cockroaches and then we can explain, hey, we're going to use a bait and we need to make sure this food is cleaned up so that they will go for the bait, not the food that they've already been eaten. A lot of times customers can understand that, and not all, but most customers will help you out in this. I do understand there are some that just will not do it. So Once we've established that, we need to establish action threshold. And this is where pros decide when to respond. So the thresholds are site specific. And basically, that tells you when the pest level justifies action based off the biology, client expectations, and environmental risk. For example, one ant trail in a restaurant kitchen needs action, right? Because it's a restaurant kitchen, and we don't want any pests really in a restaurant kitchen. One ant outside in landscaping, we just observe that. Okay, well, it's out in the landscaping. Is it bothering anything? No. But hey, we need to note that it's there because maybe that ant's foraging, but maybe there's a nest somewhere nearby. One German cockroach in any place inside is pretty much an action threshold. Whereas sometimes there's other pests that are much more acceptable, like some of the ground beetles and things like that. They don't bother people as much, where, it just comes in kind of seasonally, or they're already dead when they come in. Sometimes a ladybug or two gets in, where there's these things where there's certain thresholds to action, and it's going to vary from site to site. Um, if you're doing commercial kitchens and things like that, you just got to know, like, or pantry pests, that becomes a big deal. So there's a lot to learn as far as thresholds are concerned. Um, and a lot of times the companies that you're with, or there's certain like the restaurants or warehouses, they're going to have certain things of where what's acceptable and what's not, and we're going to have to meet those action thresholds. But once we know that, we have to monitor and document things. This is like the core part of IPM. It's not optional. We really need to monitor and document. And a good IPM monitoring and program includes location maps. Hey, maybe not every residential place is going to have a location map, but especially if you're doing things like warehouses and food establishments, you're going to want location maps. Pest control counts and trend logs. Um, this is why you see people numbering flue traps and things like that so they can go over pest control counts and trends. I especially with something like a German cockroach infestation, those counts and trends are very important. Environmental conditions. Most softwares these days allow you to put in condition codes, or you can even put them in certain sections of, like, these are conditions that I see. It's great to put those onto an account, whether it's a tag or we're telling it to the customer. We want to have that documented somewhere, especially like so that we can go back if a customer calls us and says, "Hey, I'm still seeing mice. Did you ever take care of the hole in the crawl space vent?" No. Okay, we need to take care of that first, or else you're going to continue to see mice, right? Action taken and outcomes. This is basic to what we do. So when we're turning in to our customers what we did, that work order, they know what action we took and any outcomes that happens. This is also a rule in most departments of agriculture, where we have to basically put down everything we use and what action we took. So documentation turns knowledge into professional results. It's not just the spray and pray method, right? We're actually seeing what we're doing. We actually have counts and numbers. We have analytics. So how do we monitor? Well, you have your visual inspection, of course, that can be helpful. Customer interviews, they're not as reliable, but it can get you somewhere. And then there's, of course, monitoring devices. This could be glue traps, pheromone traps, monitoring blocks, and even with some like rodent stuff, I use trail cams and some of these other issues that new technology is coming out and is going to come out and is going to help us monitor a lot better, especially things with AI and cameras. Those are going to be on the horizon, but we use all of this stuff to monitor. And when you're doing a monitoring plan, you have to take into account everything that you see, um, everything that you talk to the customer about, and what you're seeing on the devices. So you're really getting information and then deciding what to do with that information. Because from that information, we choose our tactics. So, how are we going to control the pest? Go back to your knowledge base and ask, what in the environment can I change to reduce the pest activity? Can I use sanitation, like in the cases of German cockroach, ants, and rodents? Can I use exclusion for like rodents, occasional invaders, and wildlife? What about mechanical traps? Should I use a snap trap, a snare? What about a biological control method? Maybe it's a predatory wasp or BTI or something of that nature. Okay, well, let's say I need to use pesticides. Which ones do I use? Well, what's the least impactful on people, property, and pest? What's the most effective? Where do those two things meet, right? So sometimes something might be extremely effective, but hey, the cost is too high on the impact level to people, property, or pets, right? Liquitox works great, right? But it may be a danger because there's pets around, like at this whatever facility, oh, there's pets that roam around here, and you're going to put Liquitox out, right? So you got to think about these things. And then of course there's still cost analysis when it comes to it because the cost is way high. I know it's strange to talk about cost, but if the cost is way high that the consumer isn't going to use it, then we might need to choose a different avenue because that certain consumer might not be able to afford the treatment that we're recommending. So you need to ask yourself, how can I intelligently use these methods to create a treatment protocol? So let's say, we're talking about, rodents. Like what can we do with rodents? Exclusion, traps, and then baiting, or maybe we don't bait. Maybe we can just do exclusion and traps. So what is the pest and where is it on the property? What do I know about the pest and will lead me to my recommendations? We're going to utilize multiple control methods, apply the correct product for the pest at the correct rate and application, and evaluate. That's very simply put how we're going to do this and solve these issues. For your evaluation, you should have a way to monitor for pests, whether that be glue traps, fly light traps, things like that, pest counts. Um, you want to do an inspection each time. You want to use thresholds and decide if there's any action that is needed. And of course, document, document, document. If you didn't document it, it never happened, right? Just remember there's economic, health, and environmental outcomes that we need to be mindful of. So, national expansion programs emphasize that IPM isn't just scientific, it balances economic health and environmental goals, reducing unnecessary cost and risk through informed decision making. And then, at virtues, what IPM means is it's a systematic inspection and documentation. We do threshold based responses. We try to use non chemical strategies first, target control tools where needed, and clear communications with our clients. This approach increases effectiveness, sustainability, and customer trust, all what we're looking to be at. So, IPM in the field, let's talk about how to use this in the field. And here's kind of like a rodent case study on a commercial site. So, we are going to inspect and what are our entry points and conditions? We're going to set some thresholds based on the activity. Exclusion and sanitation is first. We need to make sure that we get the droppings and exclude the pest out of there first, and then go with strategic trapping. If they're still eating off of certain things in a facility, like let's say that they found the box and they're eating off of whatever's in the box because we just have it stored there and they continue doing that, why are they going to go to your trap? So we need to make sure we do that sanitation. Last resort's chemical control with bait stations. Like maybe we want to, there's sometimes that rats are super shy and won't go after traps where we might have to resort to a bait station or something like that, or different style traps, whatever it has to be done. And then monitor, document, and adjust. We're going to keep our log going of what's going on and adjust. And the outcome is long-term reduction with minimized exposure. So the less product and pesticide we can put out, the better, especially if we're solving that problem. IPM is not magic, it's a professional framework. And it's based off data and science, and it combines multiple tactics, not just one. Focuses on prevention first. It uses chemicals only when justified, and it protects people, property, and environment. So your role as a pest management professional is not just application, it's intelligent decision making. So that's what we're all about is we're going to make intelligent decisions and protect the people, the property, and their environment, give them their peace of mind, and do things based off of this framework. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave a comment or give me a shout out. If not, I'll see you in the next lesson.